Are you looking for a life of freedom and flexibility? Do you want to have as much success with your family as you do in business? Here at the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast, we break down the barriers and bust the myths that are keeping you from living your best life. You deserve a thriving family, rich faith, and business success. Visit us at efmlife.com to connect. And now, welcome to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast.
Record. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Today, we want to go back and reference one of our more popular episodes, and that was the one, number eight, right? On Billy Graham's biggest regret. And if you recall, his biggest regret was not spending enough time with his family. And so this episode, we just want to talk with you about creating these special one-on-one experiences with each member of your family. You know, last episode, we talked about dating your wife. This one, we want to talk about the importance of dating your kids, of creating these awesome experiences, because the family that does that, you are just creating this awesome family unit that's stronger because these experiences you have. And guys, it doesn't have to start later in life. You can do it with your toddlers, right? And so today we just want to talk about this. And boy, we're coming off a cool time here because Jamie, you just got back from a pretty amazing adventure with one of your kids. Where were you last week? What were you doing? And what sparked that whole thing?
It wasn't last week. It was a day and a half ago. I was in Cuba. It was like I was looking around trying to make sure I didn't say something that got me thrown in jail. I think they might be listening right now.
So you still have like mojitos in your blood, probably, right?
I do.
You're one of those evil capitalists. Watch out.
It all kind of started in the context of us having these conversations about connecting with our kids. And, you know, we have a lot of great conversations offline where we're good friends. And I just felt like, we've talked about this before. The firstborn kid, sometimes they come into this world and they're the center of attention. They have these great leadership skills, and you know, a lot of firstborns are pretty aggressive personalities. That's just the way it is. And so I just felt like, especially from some of your coaching with you guys, that it was just a time where I needed to build rapport and connection with Diego, especially now that he's working more in our Amazon business. We brought him on as a team member, and he's an important part of our family, and just wanted to do that with him one-on-one. So I want to thank you guys personally and publicly for giving me permission to lean into that relationship, because sometimes with the firstborn, it can be tough. Diego, I know you're listening. I love you. You're a chip off the old block. You're a strong personality. He's like, I'm like the ID on the disc, and I think Diego is the DI. Like, he is, get out of his way, because he's going to be doing some big things in the future.
Diego, I'm a firstborn as well, and I totally resent that conversation that Jamie said.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm the center of the universe. I wasn't even aware there was a universe.
Yeah. And another thing is, I'll give a shout out to two of my buddies, Vincent Puglisi and Roger Whitney, but they're both ones on the Enneagram and high Ds, and so is Diego. And like, when I figured out that Diego was the same personality as them, it made sense why we butt heads, but it also made sense why you got to move out of this kid's way, because he's coming to charge him. He's like a bull in a china shop sometimes.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome, Jamie, that you took action on that too. I mean, we had a conversation, and I think it was the next week you had a trip booked with Diego where you're going to spend intentional time. And that is what it's all about, is taking action on this thing, not just talking about it. So well done.
Absolutely. Thanks, that was pretty cool. I mean, we literally kind of rallied around and had this conversation. I think Michael and I were a little surprised getting a text saying, I'm going to Cuba with Diego next week.
Yeah. I was thinking you want to go camping around the corner or something? How about Cuba?
Well,
we had all these and I gave him the choice of like 4 or 5 different places. And he didn't know this, but Cuba was like my number one. And he was like, let's go. Like, we know nothing about it. We haven't been there. So that's why he's the one that chose it. So I'm excited. That was good.
That's good, man. Well, Michael, you just mentioned it, and the key word there is intentional. And so that's kind of number one here is upending the routine of our life, upending the routine of our family situation, and being intentional to create these special memories, right? They're so important. I mean, we get wrapped into the day-to-day, and it's great if we're living this free and flexible life and we have time to invest in kids and be involved in their daily activities. That's awesome. But sometimes those just sort of blend into memory, and it's taking these one-on-one times, scheduling dates with your kids. So, Jamie, you just had this awesome experience. Michael, what are some things you do, even with your young kids, to create these special experiences where you're being intentional?
Man, I love having these conversations because, well, I know it's important to spend time with your kids one-on-one. This conversation we had led me to take action in my own life too, because guess what? I have a firstborn son, and I am not a firstborn. So his go-getter mentality is a bit of a shock for me. Being a middle child, 7 on the Enneagram, he is like, let's do this. And by the way, I'm driving. Let me tell you his age too. He just turned 3 recently. And if I let him drive, he would drive. But, I got thinking like, yeah, we spent a lot of time together, but it's not really one-on-one, and it's not intentional. It's not scheduled. And so I decided we've done this for 3 weeks now. We have a morning, and I call it Gunner and Papa Day. And basically from the hours of 9 to noon, he gets to do whatever he wants, but I'm coming with him. And we're going to do all that together. So we went to the Science Museum together. We're going to go to the bounce house together. Whatever he wants to do, we're going to go do it. But here's the thing, like, it's not always so cut and dry. You don't just plan it and then you go and then you skip off together and have this amazing relationship. First time I wanted to do this, Gunnar had no interest in going. Like, we had talked about it the night before. He was kind of excited about it. Then the next morning came around. I'm all excited. I'm like, yes, I'm going to be such an awesome dad. This is going to be great. Yay me. I'm talking myself up, obviously losing the whole point of the thing in the process. Then I go, say, all right, Gunnar, it's time to go. Let's do this. Gunnar and Papa Day. He's like, no, thanks. I don't want to go. I want to stay here. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? We've been talking about this. We planned this out. Let's do this. He's like, no, I don't want to go. I want to stay home with Mama. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I carved out the whole morning for him. And what I realized is that we can't just leave it there as dads. We have to push through some of that discomfort, some of that resistance, and just act as if like that's what we're doing. Lead our kids into that, even if they have a moment or an emotional moment where they're not interested or they don't want to go. Say, well, buddy, sorry, this is what we're doing. We committed to it. Let's go. And, he ended up having a blast, and now he can't wait for the next one every time. So it's not always cut and dry. It's not always super easy to pull off, but it's worth pushing through to make it happen.
That is good. Well, and just being intentional. Now he's looking forward to it, right? He's understands like, okay, I got to get through my own stuff and just do this because it's fun. I think I remember you sharing about this on a Facebook post, or maybe just, on a call, but just how even one morning he didn't want to go do some sledding. And you're like, no, you said you want to do sledding. I know you love sledding. We're going to go do sledding. And believe me, I know the hassle of getting a little kid ready to go outside on snow is like incredible.
30 minutes.
But once they get out there and they're in the moment and sledding, like, it's awesome, right? They're having snowball fights and all the rest, but you just have to help push them through. And that's like your leadership as a dad.
Yeah, man. And I don't like seeing my kids upset. And Gunnar was crying. Like, that's how bad it was. That's how much he didn't want to go sledding. He's like weeping and wailing, like, I don't want to go. Like, it's like crushing me as his father, but I knew like I had to get him out there. And once he was out there, he was just like, again, every time we get to the bottom of the hill, again. I couldn't peel him off the side of the hill when it was time to go home.
That's awesome. Jamie, what about you, man? What are some things that you do to upend your routine in the family? So Jamie and I, we both have 4 kids. And let's just be honest, sometimes it just is chaotic from the moment that alarm goes off or the first kids are awake until bedtime. So sometimes you really have to be intentional with each kid. So what do you guys do? What do you and Ruthie do in terms of these experiences with each child?
Yeah, we have a week, like we assign the week to a child. And so this will be like Emilio's week. And then when either one of us is running errands, the kid who it's his week gets to have the special one-on-one time. And just driving to the store. I like doing groceries with the kids. I'm one of those dads that gets sent to like the grocery store with like a list like a mile long. And it's great to bring one of your kids with you and then try to have a fun time with it. You get to, I don't know, I think it's at Whole Foods, but they got those little, the little tiny grocery carts that says like shopper in training.
Yeah.
And so like, my kids will like push those around and just to have fun with it. And, you know, when you bring 3 or 4 kids into the grocery store, it's just not the same as one of them. It's more like you're a babysitter. You got to make sure that big, tall display at the end cap doesn't get knocked down. I think it's illegal technically for them to like blacklist you from the supermarket for doing that, but that's almost happened a few times.
Well, it sounds like you're talking from experience, Jamie. Why don't you tell us what happened?
No, but it's just I like doing that one-on-one time with the kids. Almost things that we need to do anyway as a family, like run bills and do errands. Like I'm always going to the post office and UPS store to drop off packages for our Amazon business, and it like working with a kid one-on-one. Like when you're running an errand and you get to spend time with your dad from the kid's perspective, it's not really like work. Like you can take a little bit longer. You know, when we go to the bank, I'll get the kid a little sucker or something like that. We know the lady Pat at the bank and talk with her. She's always interested in the kid. It's just not the same when 4 or 5 of you are all going someplace. So
aren't they angels too for some reason when it's just one of them? There's
right?
not the competition of like having to talk over each other or who gets to choose the song in the car or who's going to drive the car, right? It's like their special time.
And there's no fighting. Usually it's like the kids are all fighting over like what song they want to put on. And then when there's one kid, they're like, I don't know, Dad, like you could put whatever you want on. And I'm just like, who is this kid? Like, why are they being like this? It's almost the same like when you have another, when you guys come over during our mastermind meetings and stay here, my kids act like angels in front of you guys. And then I hear like all these good compliments. Like your kid are so well behaved. It's like you get to be that person when you take your kids one-on-one that can draw out the best. Michael, you're laughing. What's going on?
Oh yeah,
you should have seen them last Tuesday.
Let me echo that, man. I hear the same thing. Like even my parents, when they watch my kids, they're like, your kids are such angels. They didn't do anything wrong. They always listen. I'm like, no, did you swap my kids out for somebody else? Because that is not the story over here. Chris, you have some pretty cool things that you do with your kids about, just being intentional to spend time with them. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I'll tell you where it started off poorly was last year. We had a few just crazy life events that happened. And so we got off this routine and it really, I think, affected some of our closeness. So at the start of this year, actually around December, Alicia and I were like, we need to get back into routinely dating our kids all the time here. And so every single week, one of us as parents gets to take one of the kids out on a special date. And it could be, we let them choose. We actually had a family meeting. We created this list of 30 different things all throughout the valley that we could go do, whether it was the Science Works Museum or bowling or Family Fun Center or whatever, right? But just some of their favorite things. And the key is that they got to choose, and it was just a one-on-one time. And there's times where we've, dressed up on daddy-daughter dates, which is always special. And you kind of swoon over your little daughter. Just fun stuff with the boys that we've done. But I mean, every single week we've been doing that this first quarter of this year. And it's been so cool. And here's the other thing too that I love about it is that it continues on even after the date, the specialness of it, right? The kids talk about it together. Oh, what did you do with mommy last week? What did you do with daddy? And they just kind of share those special memories. And I think that's something that we need to understand more about is how special these times are to these kids. Even just a couple hours of your time where you're really intentional with them, it pays dividends. And again, it goes to creating that culture in the family where every single person is important, not just collectively as a group you're important, but every single person matters. And you're each are showing each other that in specific ways. So I love that. Michael, I think what you shared earlier about your thing with Gunnar of leading him and pushing through. I mean, that was kind of, it could be a point number 2 here, right? It's just like leading them intentionally and pushing through the annoyance or the inconvenience of doing this. Because if you're a dad that's not doing this right now, it's going to probably be a little weird at first. Let's just be honest, right? Mm-hmm. It might be kind of shaking up the apple cart of the family routine or not sure how to connect with the kid. So what does that look like? How can we lead well as a father in this and push through these battles that are going to be inevitable?
Well, I think it's number 1 is understanding that this isn't about us and how we look as dads, right? And I get caught up in this sometimes. I have this beautiful vision of how my family is going to be so awesome together when I'm going to have all these amazing experiences and my kids and I are going to be so tight and it's going to be great. And when it gets a little out of control, I realize I'm thinking about myself and not about what this is going to do for my son or my daughter. So step 1 is really remembering why you're doing this. Like when we look back in our own lives, we remember our dads. If we were fortunate enough to have amazing experiences with our dads one-on-one, we remember what that did for us. And we have to be thinking as dads what we're doing for our kids, what we're teaching them, how we're developing their character, their integrity, how they're learning different skills along the way. All those things are for their benefit, and we get to benefit from it as well, but our hearts have to be in serving them, for sure.
Love it. Yeah, I wanted to add something, just piggybacking what you're saying, Michael. It sounds a little bit disconnected with this conversation, but I remember me and Ruthie years ago. I mean, I used to be a Spanish teacher. I met Ruthie in Puerto Rico. I thought, how cool would it be if our kids were bilingual growing up? And then there was this tendency to almost like become like Gestapo with it. Like, we're going to be a family that is going to speak Spanish and English, and we're going to practice this time. Or you can just, I think the transition that happened with us is like, no. Like, this is like who we are. Like, we speak both languages. This is not something that we're going to force. This is going to be a culture of our family. We're going to go to Puerto Rico and practice Spanish with Ruthie's family over there. And I think that makes all the difference, the posture. This conversation, it's like the three of us get together and talk about how we want our families to be. We want our families to have these really strong relationships. And so this is like, yes, there's a battle and there's a mindset where we got to create this culture and it's going to be resisted. But there can be a laid back approach of like, no. Like, this is going to be something we're going to work towards continually and we're just going to get better at. The Slingerland family, the McGreevy's, insert your name here, listening to this podcast, is like, we're a family that spends time together. We do things one-on-one because we know that those times individually have different dynamics than it does when we're all together. We're fighting and we're working towards a culture where we have these amazing one-on-one relationships. It sort of takes the fighting out of it when, for you with Gunnar, Michael, like, you're like, no, we're going to go. As we practice doing that, we're just like, we're going. McGreevy's and Slingerlands and Niemeyer's, we do date. So like, we're just doing this. This is like how we roll and like how our kids are going to roll with their kids. And we're changing the family dynamic. As we build these muscles of doing this continually, it's going to become a culture of normalcy. That's what we're doing.
Yes. Can I use that word?
Normalcy.
Can I borrow that normalcy word?
Yeah, you can coronate yourself as a. And for people listening here, Michael's always mocking me out with some of these words that I use. Like back in the day, like the king would or the king would be coronated where they have a ceremony and they put the little crown on top of them. It's like we can all take that crown and put it on our heads and say, we're a family that we do these things. Michael, you can laugh at me.
I love it.
No, I love it, man. I think that's super creative.
Normalcy. Make it a normalcy for you.
So I was just thinking about it. This story just came to mind about pushing through inconveniences. So our kids have been into sports, right? And so usually the weekends, sports related, whatever. But we got an invitation to go to this other church's father-son fish camp. And it was like fishing and bow hunting kind of stuff. And, we're here in Oregon. I'm one of the guys in Oregon that doesn't bow hunt. I rarely fish.
What?
I know. I think I need to move. But so we end up saying, let's just do this. And at first the kids were like, oh, but I got to miss my soccer game. Oh, and I'm like, no, this is going to be fun. Like, it'll be a fun camping experience outdoors by a lake. We're going to do this fun stuff. And they didn't really want to go at first, but every time since then, it's been like this amazing thing. They like forward to father-son fish camp. It's just 2 nights, an hour away, but we're fishing poorly. We're bow hunting or practice bow shooting poorly. But we're just doing fun stuff outdoors, right? They've got their little knives. We got BB guns. We're just doing cool stuff. And I mean, to you guys' points, you have to push through those things because you know how special it's going to be for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if your kids are like this, but Gunnar just is uncomfortable with anything brand new or anything that he hasn't done before.
Yes.
So like if I come up with a new idea, if he hasn't seen it or experienced it or his friends aren't doing it, like he's out like immediately. No way. So I know that on the other side of that, there's going to be something valuable for him. So even when it's a stark no, sometimes he needs me to come in and say, we're going. And that's it. It sounds a little harsh, but I know by being firm in that way that I'm going to give him an experience that he's going to love.
Yes. So point number 3 we're talking about is investing in your kids. Okay, and we've talked a little bit about just the time and the scheduling and leading them, but really talking about intentionally making these memories with your kids. And Michael, you mentioned this earlier, but it's not about you. It's not about you as a father, right? I think of those like you've seen the comparison like Pinterest perfect picture to like the Pinterest fail, right? I mean, sometimes you think these dates are going to go as awesome as a father-son thing, and maybe they don't go off so well, and you're like, there's nothing I should post about this night at all because it just didn't go as planned. But you do it.
It's like the honeymoon, right? You guys remember how it's going to be so awesome the honeymoon night?
I don't know what you're talking about, but that's another episode.
Yeah, right. Our wives don't shut this down.
That's right.
We can edit that one out, right?
But just remember why you're doing this, right? I mean, investing in these kids in their own interests too, right? I mean, Jamie, when you were in Cuba just recently with Diego, I mean, was it all about what you wanted to do? Was it all about what he wanted to do? I mean, you were investing in him. So what did that look like practically on a day-to-day type of activity?
It was a lot more centered around what he wanted to do on this trip. I think the goal of this trip was a little bit different because of what we talked about a couple weeks ago. And it was just spending time. Like for 3 days in a row, we walked over 21,000 steps. And we were just walking and exploring, taking pictures. I was so focused on just like doing what he wanted that he kind of reciprocated that. My secret goal was to take all these rides in these old cars. Like, I love everything old buildings, old guitars, like that's why I love Back to the Future when he goes back to 1954. Biff's driving around in that old car. But I wanted to drive in these old cars, and Diego wanted to ride in the Coco taxi. It was like a little motorcycle that had a little rickshaw thing. And it ended up being so awesome. if you want to do it, let's do it. And then like there was all this exhaust and diesel. We were all outside. It was awesome.
You're falling more and more in love with yourself every year as you get older, right?
Exactly. No, but we did get to,
like
and then
old wine.
The last couple of days, Diego was like, "Hey, like some of those old cars, like we should drive in those." And so we both got to experience what each other kind of wanted, and it was beneficial. Like I never would have gone in the little Coco taxi thing if it wasn't for Diego wanting that, and he would have never had the experience of checking out these really old like 1940s and 50s cars if we just kept going in the Coco taxi. But I would have done it for him more and more. But
yeah, wait, wasn't it crazy in Cuba too, where there's all these awesome American cars and taxis, which you have to pay a little bit more for, but then everything else are like those beater Russian cars that are like the like in the Cars movie, how they're like the what do they call them, like the lemons? Yeah. They don't show those in the pictures about Cuba. It's just all the cool looking 50s cars from the U.S.
Yeah, but you can't really compare like a 1950s American hot rod to like a 1984 Russian car. That's like a Chevy or something, like the equivalent.
Not to get off track or anything, but
so back to investing in our kids. We'll do the car show episode later. Michael, you do this thing with Gunner that I've seen on Facebook, and again, this is getting to investing in our kids and just building their character, building their skill sets. But, sometimes with older kids, it's going to be taking them to some international awesome trip. Other ways you could do that are ways that you do this with Gunner. So talk about the Papa and Gunner show. What's that look like?
Gunner and Papa show. Yeah, he loves doing that. And I'll be honest, the way that started is he barged in my office one day and I'm trying to get stuff done. And he's grabbing at my computer and pulling up my papers off my desk and stuff. I'm like, cut it out, man. That just to kind of distract him. I was playing with this software on my computer that allows you to do a Facebook Live from your computer. So I just said, all right, let's just do a show together. And that's what it started as. But he loves like video. He's very verbal. So he loves talking, having conversations. And so I just said, why don't we just do something together? We'll call it the Gunner and Papa Show. I think he's hilarious. People will tolerate me because he's so cute. Let's do a show together and enjoy it. And he loves doing it. We do it pretty sporadically. Sometimes it's like 3 days in a row, and sometimes it's not for a couple weeks. But anytime he asks to do it, we just make it happen. We schedule it and do it together, and it's awesome. Like he's learning how to have intentional conversations even as we're talking on the show. And we get such awesome quality time together. It's just me and him. It's Gunner and Papa, and we're making something. And by the way, we're recording videos of us talking that we'll have forever and be able to look back on. So it's just one of those cool little experiences that help us develop our relationship.
That's awesome.
I love that. That's a good reminder for me. I gotta work on some extra little projects around the house on a more routine basis to just do with kids. I was recalling how we used to do this thing when the kids were in Awanas and they do these matchbox car races or whatever they were, but you just got like basically a 2x4 block of wood, and then you had these requirements and how much it needed to weigh, what it could look like, all this stuff. And so for like a week, Jesse and I like sanded things down and cut things, and like it was just a fun project to roll up our sleeves together. And again, like you said, Jamie, too, come alongside something that he's interested in, that he wants to do, and they remember those. So look for those type of opportunities around you where the kids have an interest that you need to come to their level and say, let's roll up our sleeves together and see what we can do here. So good. So guys, as we wrap up and land this plane from Cuba, we want to remind you, number one, upend your routine. Okay. Create these special memories with these kids. It's so important. Number two, lead them well. There's going to be times like we talked about where you've got to push through the annoyance or the inconvenience or whatever. But if they see you leading, you're being a strong father, and they need to see that kind of leadership that you can provide. And then number 3, like we just talked about, investing in your kids, being intentional with creating the dates, creating the projects, creating these opportunities that each individual child is going to see you taking special time to focus on them. And that goes a long way. So I just want to ask you, what are you going to do? What could you do right now to look at this next week, this next month, this next quarter, whatever it is, with each of your kids and say, I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to take the time to invest in their lives.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.